subscribe and click the bell icon to turn on notifications.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the course. In this lesson and the next couple of lessons, we're going to take a look at organization charts, or org charts as they're referred to. And org charts have been part of Visio since the beginning. And many people use Visio to maintain their organization charts. So if you need to maintain them from data, maybe an HR database, you can do that automatically from Visio. And whilst many of the things that we're going to be covering over the next few lessons specifically relate to org charts, many of the tools and techniques that I'm going to show you can also be used more widely as well. Now, if you're unsure what I mean by the term org charts, well, it depicts an organization, a management hierarchy. You might have an organization chart on the wall where you work, where you have your manager at the top. Then you have the people that work directly for him, maybe the team leaders, and then you have the people that report into them. Now, organization charts are not just used in work environments, they do have other purposes. So maybe you have the president or prime minister at the top, and then you have all of the roles that report into him or her. And also many scientific structures could be represented with org charts. So for example, the taxonomy of all the animals in the world. So what I'm trying to say is it doesn't just relate to management structures. However, that is how we're going to use it in this example. Now what we're going to do in this first lesson is I'm going to show you how you can draw an organization chart manually. And then in the next section, we're going to basically do a similar thing, but I'm going to show you how you can use the org chart wizard. And then finally, in the third section, I'm going to show you how you can style your organization charts. So let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's start off with building a manual organization chart. So the first thing I'm going to do here is jump up to File and down to New. And if we take a look at our templates, you can see that I have the organization chart template sitting just here. Now for this one, I'm actually going to use metric units instead, and I'm going to click on Create. Now notice the organization wizard has popped up, and we're going to look at this and build an organization chart using this wizard in the next section. So for the time being, I'm just going to cancel this window. Now another thing to note is that now that I've loaded up this template, you can see that I have a new ribbon, the org chart ribbon, which contains lots of different commands and tools that's going to help me build and style up my organization chart. And another thing you might notice is that this particular template has its own stencil. So if you take a look, we have organization chart shapes, and then we have different masters that we can use to build our organization chart. If I hover over the first one, the executive belt, you can see it says in the screen tip, drag onto the page, then drop positions that report into this one directly on top of it. So we have a little bit of guidance there as to how to build up our chart. Now in general, the executive belt is reserved for CEOs, people at that top level. Now before we start to build out this organization chart, I just want to draw your attention to this shapes group on the org chart ribbon. You can see here that the first one we have is belt. The next one along is notch, the next one along is pip, so on and so forth. And these are effectively different styles for your masters. And this all really comes down to a matter of personal preference. How do you want your shapes to look in your organization chart? Now for this example, I'm just going to stick with the default, which is belt. Now what I'm going to do before we get going is quickly save this file. So I'm going to do that off camera and I'll rejoin you in a couple of seconds. So let's start building out our organization chart. So the person right at the top of the pile is going to be the CEO. So I'm going to grab the executive belt master from my stencil, and I'm going to drag and drop that onto my page right at the top. Now let me zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little bit clearer. And you can see that I have two text boxes, one for the title and one for the name. So I'm going to double click in title and we're going to change that to CEO. And then I'm going to double click in the name and change that to Diane Dixon. Now there are three managers that report into Diane. And as we saw from that screen tip, when you're adding subordinates, essentially, you need to drag and drop them onto the person that they report into. So in this case, Diane. Now these people aren't the executive belt, they're the next level down. So we want to go to the manager belt. So let's click and drag and drop on top of Diane, and you can see it automatically creates that subordinate link. It also adds a connector, creating a relationship between these two different shapes. So let's go in and add a title for this person. And this one, let's just add my name just here. And I am the Accounts Director. Now I'm going to add 2 more managers and I'm going to do them in exactly the same way. So join me in a couple of seconds when I'm done. We're now going to add in some more people into our organisation chart. And you can see I'm over here on the left hand side, that's me, the Accounts Director, and I have one person reporting to me. So for this one, I want to grab the Position Belt Master. I'm going to drop it on top of my card and it's going to add my subordinate. Let's add in this person's name. And one other thing to note here when you look at these masters is that you do have one called Vacancy Belt. So if you essentially have an open position in your hierarchy, then you can utilize this master. So let's drag it and drop it on top of mine. Maybe I have a position open in my team. You can see that it doesn't have a little placeholder for a picture because this is a vacancy, but I can double click to edit this text and I might want to say this position is open and the position is Senior Accountant. Now, as you've probably already noticed, most of these masters that we're adding have this little head and shoulders icon. And these can be replaced with the actual photos of these different people. And I'm going to show you how you can do that a little bit later on, but for the time being, we're just going to leave them as they are. Now, another master that you have here is the Assistant Belt. So for example, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here, the CEO, Diane Dixon, she has a PA. So I'm going to use the Assistant Belt, drag it on top of Diane Dixon, and you can see that now this person is an offshoot of Diane. Now the assistant isn't the manager of any of these people below, which is why they don't really have a relationship with these managers, but they are directly connected to Diane. So let's replace the title here. I'm going to say PA. And there we go. So if I zoom out so you can get a better overall view, you can see we're well on the way to creating a really nice looking organization chart. Now, very often when a template like this is built, the designer of the template will have included some shortcuts for you, some time-saving tools. And in these organization chart templates, there are a few that are useful. Now, when drawing out this structure, one of the masters that we have available is 3 positions. So I'm going to say that Carl over on the end here, and let's zoom in a bit again, has 3 people reporting into him. So instead of adding these positions one at a time, I could grab 3 positions, drag and drop it onto Carl, and it's automatically going to add 3 people into my organization chart. So this is a really nice time-saving utility. Now I'm just going to quickly jump in and add in the titles and the names for each of these people. So join me back here again in a couple of seconds. Now a more sophisticated option is multiple shapes. So I'm going to grab the multiple shapes master and I'm going to drop this onto Bryony Borelli. As soon as I do that, I get this pop-up window where I can make some selections. So I can now choose how many shapes I want. So technically, how many people report into Bryony? Well, I'm going to say that Bryony has 5 people reporting into her. Are these executives, managers, positions? Well, I'm going to select position and click on OK. And you can see now I have those 5 different positions added underneath Bryony. So a really good time-saving feature. Now notice how now that I've done that, the organization chart no longer fits on one sheet of paper. Now Visio does a really good job of laying out an organization chart, but looking at this, I could probably, with a little bit of jiggery-pokery wizardry, I could probably try and fit this all on one page. So I'm going to try a few different things in order to try and get all of this information onto one piece of paper. Now the first thing I could do is go up to the Org Chart tab and look in the Layout group. You can see that one option that I have there is Re-Layout. Now I would recommend that if you are going to use this button, you maybe use it at the end. So when you finish putting together your organization chart and you know that you're not going to be adding anything more to it. Because once you relay this out, if you then decide that you want to change it, you're probably going to end up having to do it all over again anyway. So I would leave this until last. Now, in the case of this particular organization chart, I've pretty much finished, so I'm going to click Relay Out. Now, it did a little bit of something just there, but if I scroll down, I can see that it hasn't helped me with my problem of this organization chart spilling onto a second page. So I need to maybe try something else. This time I'm going to go back to my layout group and I'm going to try using this best fit to page option. Let's click. I can see again it's done something. Let's scroll down, but nope, not quite. I'm still spilling onto that second page. Another option that you have is located in the Arrange group. You can adjust the spacing, so you can increase the spacing between the organization chart shapes, or you can reduce the spacing. So let me zoom out so I can see the bottom of my chart, and I'm going to try and decrease the spacing. Now, there's only so far that Visio can decrease the spacing between your shapes, and I can see that it's not really doing anything, so I've pretty much hit that limit, and I'm still spilling onto that second page. So what else can I do here? Well, maybe I don't necessarily have to be able to see all of Bryony's subordinates. So if I click on Bryony and then back up to the Arrange group, I can say Hide Subordinates. And you'll see as soon as I do that, I get an icon in the bottom corner which lets me know that there are subordinates. And if I want to show them again, I just need to click that button. But I'm going to hide these subordinates. And when I do hide them, of course I can fit everything onto one page. However, what if I do want to show those? So let's show them again. And let's try something else to rearrange this chart. You can see at the moment my shapes are fairly concentrated in the middle of this page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my name and I'm going to drag myself all the way over to the left-hand side. And then I'm going to grab Carl and I'm going to drag him all the way over to the right-hand side. Now what I'm going to do is draw a big selection box around all of these subordinates, and I'm going to change the width of these different shapes. So again, up on the Org Chart tab, I'm going to use my width plus and minus just here. So let's decrease the width of these particular people. I think that's good enough. And then the final thing I could consider doing is selecting all of these shapes and then choosing to redo the layout. So if I go up to the layout group and click the layout drop down, I'm going to change this to a horizontal center layout. And there we go. So hopefully you can see that that now looks a lot better and I now have the organization chart fitting onto one page. That's it for this lesson. I will see you in the next one. Hello everyone and welcome back to the course. In this lesson, we're going to look at creating an organization chart using external data. And the data that I'm going to be using is stored in an Excel workbook. Now, Visio can get data for organization charts and many other types of chart from different external sources. I'm going to talk more about data and also something called shape data later on. Now, many of the sources that you can get data from are kind of specialized. For example, I can get data from Access databases, external ERP systems, and also resource planning systems. So to make this demonstration as simple as possible to understand, I've chosen an external data source that isn't particularly specialized. So we're going to be using Microsoft Excel. Now this is a relatively straightforward data source, but it supports the data structures that you see in organization charts. So in column A, we have the name of the staff member. In column B, we have their role. Column C, we have who their manager is. And then column D, the employee number. And column E, their start date. Now in this example, we're going to be ignoring columns D and E, so don't worry too much about those. The only columns we're really interested in our organization chart are these first three columns, the name, the role, and the manager. And what you'll notice is that this data is exactly the same as the data that we were using in the previous lesson when we built the organization chart manually. So let's close down this file and let's load up the organization chart wizard. So for this, I'm going to jump back into File. We're going to go to New and select Organization Chart. I'm going to keep this in metric units and click on Create. And this time we are going to use this organization chart wizard. Now on this first screen, I have two different options. I want to create my organization chart from information that's already stored in a file or database, or information that I enter using the wizard. So it's worth noting, if you want to enter in your information manually whilst you're using the wizard, you could select this second option. We have all of our information stored in an Excel worksheet, so we're going to use the first option and click on Next. We now need to specify where this information is stored, so what type of file. The first option we have is a Microsoft Exchange Server directory. So this is normally something like Outlook data. So if you want to use employee email addresses, things like that, then you could utilize this option. The third option that we have is an ODBC compliant data source. So that might be something like an Access database or another database, maybe an SQL server. But it's the middle option here that we're going to use, a text, org plus file, or an Excel file. Click on Next. Now I need to locate the file that I want to use, so the file that contains my information. So let's click on Browse, and here's my file, and click on Open. Make sure you have the correct language selected and click on Next. So what basically happens here is that Visio looks at the workbook and tries to figure out what the columns mean. And you can choose the columns in your data file that contains the correct information. So in the first one here, name, I can see that Visio has correctly picked up that that essentially maps to the name column in my Excel workbook. Now if this was incorrect, I could click the drop down and it's going to show all of the column headings from my Excel spreadsheet, and I could just select the correct one. But in this case, it's picked it up correctly. It's also picked up reports to manager, and that is also correct. So I don't need to make any changes here. Now, if there is a first name column in your data, which there isn't in As, you can also check it's picked up in the correct first name option here as well. So I'm happy with how this looks. Let's click on Next. And now I can choose the columns or fields that I want to display. So again, on the left-hand side, I'm seeing my data file columns. And then on the right-hand side, I have the fields that I'm going to display in the organization chart. And Excel has correctly picked up that I want to display the name field. The role field provides the job title information, so I want to make sure that we show that, so let's click on Add to move that into the Displayed Fields section. Now, Manager, I don't actually want to show the manager because the managers are listed as separate names, so they're going to display anyway. I also don't want to include the employee number or the start date, so I just have two displayed fields. Let's click on Next. Now I have to choose the columns from my data file that I want to add to the organization shape. And for this, I only want the name and the role. Click on Next. At this stage, I could choose to import pictures from my computer or network location. So if I automatically wanted to add pictures into my organization chart, and I have those stored off in a folder, I could select this second option and then browse for that file. Now we're not going to do that at this stage, so I'm just going to select Don't Include Pictures in my organization chart and click on Next. In this part of the wizard, I need to give Visio some rules. So it says here, your organization data may contain too many employees to fit on one page of your drawing. You can specify how much of your organization to display on each page, or you can let the wizard define each page automatically. So if you want to specify it, you can select this first option. If you want the wizard to automatically break up your organization chart across pages, then you would select the second option. So let's go for this second option. Name at the top of the page. Well, I want the top executive to be at the top of the page. I have two other things down here. I can hyperlink employee shapes across pages and also synchronize employee shapes. Now, I'm not going to talk about this at this stage because we are going to look at this in more detail later on. So I'm just going to stick with the defaults here and then click on Finish. And this is what Visio comes up with. And looking at this, I can see that it fairly accurately reflects the correct hierarchy. Now, there is something that I can see here that isn't quite correct. And so I need to go in and make a bit of a manual change. So when it comes to Diane's PA, Peter, I can see that he's been placed down here on the same level as the other managers. So what I can do is right-click on Peter, and I can choose from the contextual menu, Change Position Type. So I'm going to change him from Position to Assistant. Now when I do that, it appears that nothing has actually happened. So what I need to do here is jump up to my layout group and choose the re-layout option. And you can see that Visio reorganizes and corrects the chart. The only thing left for me to do here is go away and save this chart with a name, and then I'm pretty much done. That's it for this lesson. I will see you in the next one.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To get 4 free courses in Excel, QuickBooks, Microsoft Project, and Photoshop, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.